What is up, guys? Have you ever wondered how to build a new deck from scratch? Well, today I'll walk you through my process step by step using a couple new cards from the Traveling Travel Agency mini set. So let's get started. I'm Coach Ken and welcome back to Dad Legend. If you want to dominate the ladder with the deck that you crafted yourself, you're in the right place. Today we'll break down the deck building process into 5 main components: core ideas, synergies, mana curve, game plan, and optimization. So let's get right into it. First, we need a core idea or theme for our deck, okay? So for me, I'm really on this big spell mage thing. I think it's underrated. I think the deck is pretty decent. It's not the best deck in the format, but I think it has support. So I'm going to show you just how I got about to creating the initial big spell mage, and we'll add in a couple of the new cards and see how we have to revamp our deck building to fit those said new cards. Okay, so first of all, there's been the reveal for the mini set is not complete, but we know what the mage cards are, and just take my word for it, none of the mage cards fit big spell mage aside from this one card, and that is this card right here. You see on the top left, Portalmancer Skyla, 5 mana card, Rogue Tourist, battle cry, swap the cost of the lowest and highest cost spells in your hand. So what that means is if you have a 2 mana spell in your hand and you have like a Tsunami, a 10 mana spell, you play this card, then the Tsunami costs 2 and the 2 mana spell costs 10. Now, if you think long and hard about what you can kind of do with that, you can think like, oh, I can get a 1 mana potion, or I can use something like a Sea Breeze Chalice, and then I can swap that with a Tsunami. That sounds awesome, right? And when you realize that this is a rogue tourist and that rogue gets access to a lot of coin generation, you think like, oh, I could swap a 0-cost coin that I generated with the 10 mana Tsunami. And then you realize like, damn, that's pretty strong. All right, so that is a synergy I do want to build around, and we're just going to get right into it. But because the interface doesn't allow us, right now the interface doesn't allow us to, use those rogue cards or whatnot. So, we're going to build and we'll just use some things as placeholders, right? So, I know that I want to include her, so I'm just going to use a random placeholder. You guys know I'm not going to play this, so let's just say that's Rayla for now, okay? And what else do I want to build around? Of course, I want to build around King Tide. Or I'm sorry, this is not Rayla, this is Skyla, whatever her name is, right? So I want to build around these 2 cards. Like that is the idea that I want to work. I want to scam out big spells way before I should be able to play them, right? So with that in mind, we need to think about what the core ideas are here to work, right? Because we want to maximize our opportunities off of these 2 cards. But at the same time, we want to survive till turn 4 or 5 so that we can actually play these 2 cards. And then, turn 6, 7, or 8, where we can subsequently get an advantage off of that, right? So what's the first thing for a player who's going to play big spells? What do they need in a big spell deck? Okay, the obvious answer is spells. Okay, big spells, right? So I'm going to search for spells. I'll click spells on the filter, and, we'll go through it. We'll just go through all the pages first. I guess we start here, okay? So first of all, let's get big spells. Well, what are the good payoffs here? And how come oops, okay, there you go. Let's change that to standard so we get the actual spell pool here. So let's start from the top of the curve. And I don't care about how many cards are going to be in the deck. We're just going to keep adding spells. Tsunami, that's bonkers. We're going to add that. Galactic Projection Orb, it's 10 mana. It's interesting. Let's think about it. Sunset Valley, boom. I want that. Let's add those. DJ Mana Storm, set the cost of spells in your hand to 0. After you cast it, they cost 1 more. Boom, that sounds great. Yogg in the Box, get random spells. We already know we're playing minions, so we can't get that second benefit, so that's questionable to me. Calicos, your first spell each turn costs 0. Boom. Discover a spell. Boom. I love it. Flame Strike, not bad, especially if we have something like Galactic Projection Orb. We need a spell to cast on 7, but we don't have a spell to cast on 8. But why not? We could take it. All right, we'll just add one. All right, let's go down the list. Firelands Portal, maybe better than Flame Strike. All right, let's take that. Elemental Inspiration, no. Under the Sea, draw a different spell, summon a random minion with that spell cost. Well, if all our spells cost more than 5 or 6, then we're only drawing things that are better value than 6 mana. So, why not? Okay, Sith, spell damage, we're not playing Spell School, so no. Khadgar, equip a 0/6 Wisdom ball that casts spells. Just take it from me, Khadgar sucks. Okay, this is not worth it. Chaos Creation, not worth it. And at this point, 6 mana, it's not worth it. Okay? So, boom. We have our big spell package. Now, what do we need to do? We need to find cards that are synergistic with what we want to do here. So we want King Tide to play things that cost more than 5, okay? Under the Sea doesn't fit that, but, we're going to hopefully hedge our bets here. So, let's look at other cards that do things with spells. All right? And I mean, if you don't know what they are, just start from the beginning. Whenever you cast a spell, gain armor equal to its cost. That's okay, but we're not playing that many spells, right? So this probably won't be as useful. Let's just look for good cards. Go with the flow. No. Seaweed Chalice. No, we don't want cheap spells. Remember, we don't want to run cheap spells in the deck. Okay, Audio Splitter. Copy the highest spell in your hand. That is interesting. Let's just add it. Okay. After you cast a spell, no, because this requires you to play in a big spell, and this just doesn't fit. There's no tempo to it. It's too slow. Okay, these are cheap spells. We don't want that. We don't want none of these cheap spells. These are cheap spells. We don't want that. Okay. After you cast a spell, no, we don't want that. No. Oh, what is this card? Fiddle Fire Imp. Add a random fire mage and fire warlock spell to your hand. It's interesting, but I don't think we need that. That is an interesting card. What is this from? Festival of Legends? Interesting. Your first spell each turn costs 2. That would be interesting, but we're not playing cheap spells. We don't need tempo. Watercolor Artist. Draw a frost spell at the start of your turn. Reduces cost by 1. Tsunami is a frost spell. That sounds incredible. Let's add that guy. Okay. What else do we got? We got him. We don't want these spells. Okay. Mantle Shaper, no. Okay, with Surfing Claw. The next spell you cast, this next spell you draw is cast when drawn. We want that, right? Because if we play something like Under the Sea, or if we play something like Watercolor Artist, we'll have that benefit, right? Now let's look at neutrals. What neutrals help that? Cast a spell, no. Dry Scale Deputy, the next time you draw a spell, get a copy of it. Okay, it's a 2-drop. Okay, that feels okay, because our only spells are big. Great. Wand Maker, add a 1-cost spell from your class. That's okay, that seems okay. Bumbling Bellhop, if you're holding a spell that costs 5 or more, summon a copy of this. Boom, okay. So actually, Dry Scale Deputy, Audio Splitter, Wand Maker, we'll put them out right now because they're not necessarily... Firelance Portal, we'll move it out for now. They're not necessarily key cards for the deck, right? We don't really need that. So I think what we're looking at here is pretty core. Like, these cards seems pretty essential, although the argument can be made about whether or not some cards do belong, okay? But they have great synergy of the deck, so for now, we're going to go ahead and keep them. Now, remember that we are trying to play Skyla, and you see Skyla on the top right there. We're going to come back to this deck, okay? So we're going to save this deck, and let's look at rogue cards. So we're going to look at rogue cards from Perils in Paradise. And get rid of that. Look at everything that rogue has. Oops. From the mini set, there are a couple of interesting cards. Okay, let's see. The mini set, there's only one card that I think is really interesting for what we want to do, and that's Robocaller. 3-mana mech. Battlecore, draw an 8, 8, and 8 cost card, and then every turn those numbers change, right? So, we haven't really worked out our mana curve yet, but let's look at our curve, I don't know how. The deck already has a fair share of RNG, so I don't know if Robocaller is a card that I do want to play, right? But let's look back at rogue cards again. So from the Tourist mini set, there isn't much that I would want to play, but from the actual Rogue Perils in Paradise class, there might be a few things that are interesting. Like, okay, O Manager, deal 2 damage, combo, get a coin, right? And we were talking about the coin generation and how that might be important. So O Manager, that's a card we should consider. Petty Theft, get 2 random 1-cost spells from other classes. Now, if we did something like that, then that would also mean like that's a way to get a cheap spell in our hand without having to play spells. But this is a tempo loss. So this is a card to think about. Petty Theft, it's not that great, but we'll put it right here in a different row. That might be an option. Knick-Knack Shack, no, we don't need that. Metal Detector, after hero attacks and kills a minion, get a coin, right? So there's another coin generator. That's interesting. It makes a coin. So we're going to go ahead and add that here. Okay? And then I'm only adding it here because I can't add it into the deck. If I could add it into the deck, I would do that, right? The next card you play from a non-rogue class costs 2 less. This is obviously a very, very strong card. This is a very underrated tourist card. But we don't necessarily need to cheat out extra value in our hand. Yeah, I would consider it, but you're not going to be able to fit too many rogue cards, I think. Swarthy Sword Shiner, nah, we don't need this. We don't really have the weapon to worry about. Conniving Conman, replay the last card you played from a non-rogue class. I think we absolutely want to play something like that, right? Because if we played a Tsunami on turn 5, and then we played a Conniving Conman on turn 4, or something similar, that feels very, very strong. So I think Conniving Conman, that's definitely, hey, that's a card we need to think about. Okay, so we'll add Conman to this list here. Maestra, we can't run because we can only run one tourist. And Eudora, this is just too slow. These cards are too slow. We're already doing crazy stuff. We don't really do that. Destroy 2 random enemies, cost 1 less for each card from your... No, yeah, that's too slow. We don't need this. We don't need interactive board game plans. We want to cheat stuff out. Okay? So, that is... we're going to have to fill out a mana curve here, okay? So let me get back to standard cards. And for now, let's just add actually, before we add these rogue cards, let's fill it out with what Big Spell Mage commonly looks at. Let's do that first, okay? Because when we do that, we can see which cards we can pull out to add in these rogue cards. So in order to build the deck, we have to think about what our mana curve would look like. And, a balanced mana curve is kind of crucial, right? You don't want to be stuck with a bunch of high-cost cards that you can't play in the beginning of the game because aggro or other decks will just kill you. They'll just overrun you. At the same time, you don't want to have only anti-aggressive or 1 or 2 drops because as the game goes longer, you're playing less quality cards and running out of cards in hand while your opponent is dropping bigger quality cards to win the game. So you need to find a way to kind of fix your mana curve so it smooths out based on what your deck wants to do. So for instance, and we're going to go on a little teaching moment here, and I have some decks here just to show you what these curves could look like, right? So for a ramp curve, you're focusing on just a few cards that ramp you, and then you see a jump in the mid-game cards, and then a bunch of stuff in the late-game the late-game cost of the deck, okay? And the curve is always used to escalate the mana, right? So if you look at Dragon Druid, you see you got 3 cards at 0, 4 cards at 1, nothing at 2, most of them at 3, right? And then, you kind of get this higher end at the back end. So this is pretty common with ramp curves. And you can see, sometimes more often actually, you'll see that this 3 mana slot is kind of shared across cards that cost 4, 5, and 6 as well. But this is pretty common. Look at all your cheap spells that cost 0. Those are just wrap, right? Those are just mana acceleration. Gift Wrap Whelp is your 1-drop and activator. Malfurion's Grift is actually not a 1-drop. It's actually a 3-drop because it's pretty much wild growth for your swipe. And then you have New Heights as your ramp. You got Splish Splash Whelp. All your early game is just ramp. And then you come into this end game, which is just big, right? So this is pretty typical of rep, okay? That's not what we're going for. In our list, I guess we'll do aggro. Most aggro decks have this kind of curve where you can see that at the cheap end, it's high. And as you go to the right, it gets a lot lower, right? So here's Pain Warlock is running a lot of 1 drops, even 0 drops. And then it still has a lot of 2 drops, then slightly less 3 and 4 drops, then very little 5 and 6 drops. And in this deck, it says 7 plus cards, but that's kind of not really accurate, right? Like this deck curves out 6 as its top end, right? Party Planner Vona, this is its top end, because at the end, like Ziliax, this is actually like your 0 cost minion, and Imprison Horror or Molten Giant, even those say 4 plus or 7 plus, they're actually 0 cost minions, right? Because you're paying for them with life. So this is a typical curve. So if you're looking to play something that's very aggressive, you want to look for a curve like that. You want to make sure that you have cards to play on turns 1, 2, and 3, and then you curve very slowly into like a couple of really late game bombs, right? So that is an aggro curve. And one other curve we haven't talked about is the inverted triangle. And the inverted triangle is more often used with control decks, right? So what I mean by this triangle is you want a lot of stuff to do in the early game, as well as a lot of stuff to do in the late game. And in your mid game, you want to spend those turns only playing 1 card. And it's not even that big of a deal. Like you'd be okay like playing a 4 drop or a 5 drop, but you're feeling good just playing like multiple 2 drops, right? So this is usually common in like really control type of shells, because you just really want to survive till the end. You really want to get to your turn 7 where you're dropping late game bombs. And like right here, this is Reno, right? So Reno's late game is like, it doesn't care what happens. Like we just want to get to Reno, Deep Miner Brand, Bomb Bros. That's our game plan. So in order to get that, we have all these early game removal cards, all these things to do with 2 mana, more removal. And then your mid game is like, these are just flexible mid game cards to fill out your mid game. Like you only have like, what, 3 4 drops, 4 4 drops, 1 5 drop. Like this is pretty interesting curve, right? So I would call this the inverted triangle. You see like from 2 to 7, how like it goes down towards 4 and 5. So that is the inverted triangle. What we're looking for is something closer to, okay, yeah, there we go, to what I did previously for Big Spell Mage, which is the regular triangle, right? You want to start with some cards at the early end, and you want to peak somewhere in the middle, 3 or 4, and then you go back down the other way. And our deck looks a little weird, but that's just because we need a lot of cards in the top end also to pay off. But this is what I would call the regular triangle. So that is what we're trying to do with the build. So with that in mind, let's just go from piece by piece. And I always think it's best to start from the cheapest mana cost first. So 0, there's nothing really we can play. But 1, there are quite a bit of things. For our particular list, because we are going to be more focused on the middle cost of the cards, then we want only a few cheaper 1 mana cards. So for me, I think the bare minimum for 1 drops are 2 1 drops. I like 3. So normally I would play 3. So I'd go like 1 Babbling Book, and I think Miracle Salesman is the best 1 drop in the game. So like I just feel like having 2 of those is pretty important. That's what I would play on 1. Now on 2, we look for a couple cards that work here. So Audio Splitter, that was a card, but I liked Dry Scale Deputy. I thought Dry Scale Deputy was pretty solid. Audio Medic is okay. That card might be pretty good. I would throw Audio Medic. Where's Dry Scale? Okay, there's Dry Scale. I think we add that. Let's see, what else? I think at 2, I want to be at about 6. So Doomsayer, that would have been a card that I would have thought was be pretty interesting. Like out of Flint, this is actually what I run: Flint and 1 Gold Panda. I was running Doomsayer, and I actually think Doomsayer is probably the card that you want in my particular build. But for now, let's just not right? Let's get more normal cards. I don't want the curve to be too crazy. So now, for me, the peak of my triangle, I believe, should be 3. All right. So now we're looking for all the good stuff at 3. There's nothing else in main chat we want to play. Maybe tide pools, but we can skip it for now. Watercolor artist seems good. We already have bumbling bellhop at 3. So we have a couple of good 3 drops here, but what else can we add to the deck that feels worthwhile? I think for sure we should be looking at something like Mixologist. If I can, okay, well, Gorgon Zarmu, that's a good 3 drop. We definitely, let's throw him in there for now. Mixologist, let's throw to a Mixologist. What I like about Mixologist is he gives you the 1-cost potion. So if we do end up running Skyla, right, there is another card that can generate us something cheap to swap values with the Tsunami, right? So that's one of the reasons why I like Mixologist, and also it's because it's pretty it's pretty versatile of a card. So that's us at 3. And now you can see our curve. Now we've got like this nice curve that kind of peaks there. So now we got to fill in more of 4. And at 4, we're already running King Tide. I guess Grifta and the ETC makes sense. So let's see if we can find Grifta and the ETC. Oh, okay. Well, first is the ETC. I only run the ETC for one reason, and that's because I can fit DJ Mana Storm and Galactic Projection Orb in the ETC. And I think it's worth talking about now. So we're going to go ahead and add the ETC. All right. So I know some of you who maybe don't play the deck are probably wondering, why would you put the Galactic Projection Orb in the ETC? And the reason is because you might have pulled it off of Under the Sea, right? Or Surfalopod, right? Especially Surfalopod, right? It casts when drawn. So imagine a turn where it's turn 5, you play Surfalopod, turn 6, you pull Galactic Projection Orb, and by this turn you haven't played Sunset Valley or Tsunami. That means this card has done nothing. It does jack shit. Now, we could put this in the ETC, and if we hide it in the ETC, that means later on in the game, we'll get access to it, okay? Okay, so I know that Galactic Projection Orb, that may be a card that I want to play in there. I also know that DJ Mana Storm, that this card is only valuable to me if I have the big spells in hand. And more often than not, there's not going to be a case where I'm going to need to pay him to discount more than 1 or maybe 2 spells at max. However, like if I do draw poorly, there might be a necessity or a need that warrants having him in the sideboard so that I can pull him out. So I think DJ Mana Storm is another card that could fit in the ETC, right? So, and I only know about this optimization because of how I've played it so far in games, right? So I'll throw those guys into the ETC. Now, that's assuming we run ETC, okay? Like, that's assuming that the chance that either of these 2 cards will be necessary for a game are important, okay? And I don't know if they are. Like, to be quite frank, I mean, there have been a few times where DJ Mana Storm has won me a game, but Galactic Projection Orb has actually never won me a game or, helped me win anything like that, okay? So that's 4. We can move on to 5. At 5, we want to play Skyla. We already know that we want to play Skyla, but we also want to play Surfalopod. So we know that we're doing that at 5, but there's other options, right? Sleet Skater, that's a good like defensive option, but I don't feel the need to play it. And then at the top end of the curve, we already have the big spells that we're looking for, right? But now we can, there are a couple other cards that we should consider, like ultimate end game cards, right? So like a Marin. Marin is a card that might be interesting, but let's say Yogg and Ziliax. Let's just put the 2 best bombs. Like, this is pretty close to what I run, but it's not exactly. But where's Yogg? Where's Ziliax? Okay, we'll add Yogg, and then let's go add Ziliax, okay? So there you go. So now, this is our big spell mage deck without the rogue card. Okay? Well, this is our rogue card right here. This is Finalizing Skyla. Okay? So, looking at this, we know... let's look at our curve real quick. So we see our curve here. Boom! This is a pretty nice curve. Okay? It's pretty cool. Right? We have this gradual slope where it's pretty easy. Like we just play a turn 1 play, then we play a turn 2 play, then we play a turn 3 play, and then we, get into this late game where we're hopefully scamming out stuff, right? Now, can we add these 3 to 4 cards on the left, and they do anything better than any of the cards on the right? Now, the first thing to consider is how we would change the curve, all right? And before, I would think, obviously, for me, the strongest card here is Conniving Conman, okay? Conniving Conman is the card. So replay the last card you've played from another class, all right? Now, let's look at our deck. How many class cards does it have current? We got a Babbling Book. That would suck to replay. Like, I would only want to replay things that cost more than 4, right? So, Surflapod, that'd be cool. Under the Sea, a spell, right? Like, we'd want it in a situation to play a spell. Sunset Valley, Tsunami, that's when we want it. So I would consider him, even though he's 4, I would consider him like a 5 or a 6 drop, but I do like it. Now, what cards could he replace to kind of fit that? And, it is difficult to say. I don't know. I don't know. I do want to put him in there. And I think he'd be better than the ATC. To be totally honest, he would flat out just be better than the ATC. So let's just, for now, let's just call Big Game Hunter Conniving Conman. All right, that is our Conniving Conman right there. Okay. Now let's look at the other cards. We have a 3-drop in the weapon. Is the weapon better than any of the 3 drops we have? Now that is arguable. The weapon is better than a Mixologist. Well, it's not better than Bumbling Bellhop, okay? Bumbling Bellhop is like OG, like, this card is crazy. Must play. Better than Gorgonzormu? It's hard to argue. Gorgonzormu is just so flexible. Mixologist? Now, so Mixologist, the value of Mixologist is it gives you, like, this spell, which is versatile, right? Like, depending on what you get off of it, like, there's value you can get from having that spell in hand. So I'm not sure I want to get rid of Mixologist, but this is a worthwhile discussion here. So I would consider Mixologist and Metal Detector as a flexible spot to test in the future, right? So when we get to optimization, that might be something I want to look at. So every turn that I play Mixologist, I need to think in my head, would I have preferred having 3 attack on the board to kill something and to generate a coin, which in the future I could discount with Skyla, right? I could discount here with Portalmancer Skyla, or that I could use to help ramp to something else earlier, like a Surflapod. On the other side of the coin, that, no pun intended, would I have preferred a Mixologist, which would have put something on the board, a body on the board, and allowed me to cast a spell and maybe clear a board, right? Like, that's the value of Mixologist. It is pretty good. So I don't know. And gosh, I don't know if we can fit another 3-drop or if we can get rid of something else on the top end to fit that in. Like, I don't really see that being the case. We have to kind of think about that for a minute, okay? So we'll come back to Conniving Conman. That's a key. We're going to add him to there. Metal Detector, I don't know. And it says 2/2, but guys, it's been buffed, right? So it's 3/2 card. So that leaves 2 more cards here, Petty Theft and O Manager. So this is coin generation, and these would be at 2 mana. So we would do 2 things. We would look at replacing cards at 2, or also replacing cards at 1 and replacing cards at 3 to fit in those 2 drops. Now, remember when I said that the minimum number of 1 drops was 2, right? Like you'd play 2 copies of 1/1 drop. And you would only do that solution if you were running a ton of 2 drops, right? I think that at the very least, O Manager. See, O Manager is not really a 2-drop, right? Like, you need something with it. You need a 1. Like, O Manager is so tricky because you need to use a coin to kind of like activate this on 1, or on turn 2, it doesn't do anything. You don't have prep, right? We're not rogue, so we don't have prep. Petty Theft gives you 1 mana spells. I don't know if that's just so much better. I don't know about Petty Theft. Like, I don't know about Petty Theft. Like, Conniving Comment is good. But I don't know if it's good enough to play Skyla just to have command. But if I can get 2 more cards, like Metal Detector and maybe O Manager, I think that might be worthwhile. Petty Theft, I think, is just a little too much RNG. We already have RNG with the Mixologist, so we'll take off Petty Theft. But O Manager could fit. So look, what if we played O Manager instead of Audiomatic? We'll drop out Audiomatic and we'll add O Manager. So for now, let's look at a 2-drop and we'll just throw that in for now. Annoyatron, okay, that is our O Manager, okay? And then, like, now the question is back to whether or not we add Metal Detector, but we're still a card heavy. Now, here's another thing to consider. We're still running the same number of 2-drops, but what if we drop Babbling Book and added a couple more 2-drops? So what we could do here is, like, I would drop Gold Panner, and then, I wouldn't. Yeah, no, I would drop Gold Panner, and instead we'd run Greedy Partner. So Greedy Partner is another good 2-drop, but the problem with Greedy Partner is this is only good if you're holding more 2-drops, right? So I would say the minimum number of cards in order to make Greedy Partner activated often would be it would be 8, okay? 8 or 9. I would say that would be the minimum number. So I actually want to have 1 more 2-drop in here. We already dropped the 1-drop, so we're at 7. I think we want 1 more in here. What is the card that we drop? Maybe a Mixologist. If we look at our curve, we're high on 2s and 3s. What are we playing out for? We got the Conniving Conman and a King Tide. See, this is why I want a lot of 3s, because Conniving Conman, like I said, it can't be played on the curve. It's not really a 4. And at 5, we have Surfilopod and Skyla. So I would... Well, we're not going to play both Yogg and Zil, so we can drop that. We want to fit a 2-drop in here. I'm pretty adamant about fitting 1 mature 2-drop. I don't even know what the 2-drop would be. Would it be an Audiomatic? Like, let's see. What are our 2-drop choices? Copy the highest cost spell in your hand. That could be an option. Next Elemental you play costs 2 less. I mean, that makes our watercolor artist that much cheaper. What can we play? These are all spells. On 30 Rat, Cult Neophyte. Those are good cards. We could just throw in 1 Doomsayer. We could throw on a Doomsayer or even a Drink Server. Drink Server is pretty okay. Gold Panner, we could go back to adding the Gold Panner. See, remember, but if we add this card, this means dropping 1 card. So what is the card that we're going to end up dropping? We're going to think about, like, and it's pretty important. And I say this because it's necessary to have this in order to make Greedy Partner worthwhile. Like, I see a lot of lists running Greedy Partner and there's only 6 2-drops. That's not enough, because that just means that you're not playing your cards on curve, and you need to play cards on curve. So, let's add Gold Panner. And this means dropping 1 3-drop at this point. Or even a later game drop, but we've already dropped Ziliax. This will be difficult to to figure out. Oh, I'm sorry. Did we even add? Matt, we haven't even added. I guess we could drop Gorgon Zormo and not have that late game action that he gives us, but that feels really, really good to have. You could drop Gorgon Zormo, and let's go back to Zuliax. And we'll make Zuliax this module. And then this is now looking at like our list, right? So Miracle Salesman, this is a 2-drop. So this is O Manager, Dry Scale, Flint, a Gold Panna, 2 Greedy Partners. Then we got Bellhop, Mixologist, Watercolor Artist. Then we have Conniving Conman, King Tide. Then we have Portalmancer Skyla, Cephalopods, Under the Seas, Calico, Sunset Valley, Zuliax, and Tsunami, which feels pretty good. So Portalmancer Skyla has given us access to at least 2 different rogue cards in the deck, potentially a 3rd in Metal Detector. And, Metal Detector is probably worth trying out at this point. So, there are cards that are missing. Like we opted to not run Grifta. I think that's okay. Like really, really banking on the mana cheat. And I think that is actually kind of pretty helpful. Maybe we drop Mixologist. I guess for now, Mixologist would be Metal Detector, and I would test that out. And now this is my deck list, right? So now for future optimization, which is like the last thing we're basically going to talk about, I just have to play the deck and think about cards that would have been replaced. So right now, we're debating about whether adding Portalmancer Skyla is a good enough reason to change Big Spell Mage, okay? So the other option is not to have these Rogue Carriage and Skyla and play what we originally played. And I think that's perfectly fine. But, it's always fun to test new things, and we want to try this out. So what I will be doing, and right now there are only like two actual cards, I would say, that, we have to consider about whether it's worth it, and that's a Metal Detector and O Manager. So when the game goes live, the mini set goes live, I'll have O Manager in place of Annoyatron, and I'll Metal Detector here in place of Mixologist, and I'll play games. And anytime I get O Manager, I'll think about whether or not that card would have been better as whatever I had in its place previously, like a Doomsayer or Gorgon Zormo, right? So that's the trade-off here, because we added Greedy Partner. Remember, we used to have 7 3-drops, but we've gone down, and instead we have 7 3-drops and 3 1-drops, and instead we now have 8 2-drops. But we can go back, we can remove Greedy Partner, we can remove O Manager, and we can go back to 7 3-drops and 3 1-drops, right? Like, so that there is that curve that we can go for. And the only way to figure out if that's worthwhile is to actually play games with the deck and see what happens. So that is going to be my list. And this is how I'm going to generate my first list when the expansion comes, or the mini set comes, and this is what I'm going to play. So I hope that video was somewhat informative, and let me know how you guys kind of tackle deck building. I know this video was kind of long. I'm not going to edit this video at all. There's going to be no extra bells and whistles. This is just straight info, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please give me a like, drop a comment, or subscribe. It really helps, and I appreciate it. Good luck as the mini set comes out.